We continue today with Devarim Perek Gimel. Moshe is in the middle of giving his version of the history of the last 40 years, starting in Pasuk Aleph, Vanefen Vana'al Derech HaBashan. So, right, just a few months ago, we went north and we came to the territory of Bashan. I'd say, Og Melech HaBashan L'Kortenu Hu V'chol Amo Milchama Edrei. And he and his people came out to us to fight us in battle at Edrei. Vayomer Adonai Elai Al Tirauto. Kiviadcha Natati Oto V'et Kol Amo V'et Artso V'asita Lo Kasher Asita L'Sichon Melech Amri Asher Yoshev B'Cheshbon. God said to me, don't be scared. I will deliver him and his troops and all of his armies to you as I did to Sichon. It's interesting for Moshe to say this, that Moshe was scared and that God had to assure him, because maybe it assures Bnei Yisrael, who in time is going to be scared in certain battles, even if they know that God is with them, they still will be scared at times. And so Moshe says to them, you will be scared, maybe, like me, but don't worry, God will be there for you. God delivered them, and we decimated them. At Kol Harav Be'etahilo Eta Kiryah Shirlo Lakachnu Meitam Shishim Ir Kol Chevel Argov Mamlechet Og Bashan. We captured all the town, all 60 towns of the Argov, the kingdom of Og. Kol Ela Arim B'tzurot Choma Gvoa Delatayim Uvriach Levad Me'area Prazi. They were fortified. They had high walls, right? Again, don't be scared of what the spies told you in the past about the walls, about the fortified cities in Canaan, because we were able to defeat Og and his tremendous army and take all of his walled, fortified cities. Vanacharem otam kasher asinu l'sichon melech Heshbon, hacharem kol ir, mitom hanashim v'hataf. We took it all. We destroyed every town. Men, women, and children, and we retained the booty as booty, the cattle and the spoils. And thus we seized the territory of the two great Amorite kings on the eastern side of the Jordan River, all the way from Arnon to Har Hermon. Sidonim Yikru Hermon Sirion V'Amori Yiklu Shnir. Different names given to it. Kol Arei Mishor V'Chol Gilad V'Chol Bashan Atzachla V'Adrei Arei Mamlechet Og Babashan. So we took all the lands of Gilad, all the lands of the that Og had in the past. Kirak Og Melech Bashan Nishar Miyatar Rephaim. Hine Arso Eres Barzel Halohi Birabat B'nei Amon Teisha Amat Arka. The Arba Mot Rachba Ba'amat Ish. Only Og was left of the Nephilim, and you may be familiar with the Midrash that places Og as a very old man holding on to the ark, to the Teva, having lived for many centuries, millennia, according to the Midrash, going back all the way to the time of Noach. Whether we want to place him that far back, he's the only one that remains of the giants. He had a humongous bed, which is now in Rabbah, 9 cubits long, 4 cubits wide. We took his land at that time. And part of the land I gave to Ruvain and to Gad. And the rest of the Gilad further north I gave to the tribe of Menashe. All this land was just called a Riphaim, which is right. He was the last of the Riphaim, another one of those words that means seemingly giants. I gave it to the Chatzi, to half of Menashe. And what happened? Yair ben Menashe lakach kol chevel argov agvul agishurim ma'akati v'akro tam al shmo et habashan chavot Yair ad hayom hazeh. Yair, the son of Menashe, captured much of that territory, and he called and the place was called, because he was Yair, was called Chavot Yair. And that's still the case. And as we see, as I mentioned, this is a comment based upon the Ibn Ezra, this idea of Ad Hayom Hazeh, until this day. Sounds like it was written a little bit later. The Ibn Ezra talks about how certain places, based upon working off of a Gemara in Masechet Baba Basra, that certain things were added later by Yehoshua. So maybe this is 20, 30 years later that Yehoshua is saying, still today, 20 years later, it's still named after Yair. Verse 15, Pasuk Tedvav, L'machir natati Gilad, to Machir I gave the Gilad, Uloveni, Ulegadi natati min Gilad, V'anachal Arnon, Toch Hanachal Gvul, Ve'ad Yabok, Hanachal Gvul, Bnei Amon, and to Reuven and Gad. I also gave part of the Gilad, then going south, which was previously the territory of the Ammonites. Going further south, all the way down from the Kinneret down to the Dead Sea. This is their territories. And here we get to something, going past territories, and Moshe says, and I commanded you on that day, Adonai Elohechem natan lachem et haaretz hazot. Hashem, your God, gave you this land, the Rishtah, Chalutzim, Tavru, Lifnei Achechem, Bnei Yisrael, Kol Bnei Chayil. God gave you this land, but you need to be on the front lines of the battle until the other 9.5 tribes conquer Canaan. Only your wives and your children and your cattle, your sheep can remain here, because I know that you have a lot of sheep, a lot of livestock, a lot of cattle, and that's why you want this territory. It's interesting. We go back to the chapter where Reuven and God approach Moshe. The chapter begins with Mikneh Rav, starts with their cattle, and later when it talks about them building, then after they agree to this oath, they build first barns and things for the sheep and for the cattle, and afterwards it talks about them building huts for their children and for their wives. Moshe reverses the order. The priority is Nishechem v'tapchem. It's your wives and your children. It's your family. It's not the sheep. It's not the wealth that should be the priority. And Moshe continues, verse 20. And you need to remain fighting with them until the other 9.5 tribes conquer their land and get their territory. And Yoshua I commanded at that time, you've seen what I did to Sichon and Og, these 2 great kings, and God is going to help you when you lead Bnei Israel over into the other side of the Jordan River. You will also be able to defeat the enemies. Lo tira'um. Yoshua, don't be scared. Moshe said, I was scared, and Moshe knows Yoshua is not the strongest of people, that he will be scared. And Moshe says to him, therefore, don't be scared. Why? Because it's not going to you who's going to be fighting the battle, Yoshua. God will fight the battle. And as long as you obey, as long as you listen to the commandments, as long as you lead a just and compassionate people of Israel, God will make sure that we are victorious. And continuing now in verse 23, and this is actually the beginning of a new parsha, Parshat Ve'etchanan, Ve'etchanan el Adonai beitahi lemor. And Moshe continues, and I pleaded with God at that time, Adonai Elohim ataychel hachilot elarot et avdecha et gadchelcha ve'et yadcha chazaka. You who let your servant, right, see your greatness. You let me see your greatness. You let me see your strong arm. Asher miel bashamayim varet asher yasech ma'asech v'voratecha. Whose powerful deeds no other God in the heavens or earth can equal. Please let me pass over the Jordan and see the beautiful land on the other side of the Jordan River. The good hill country in the Lebanon. Midrash makes this statement. Haratov refers to Harabayit, Yerushalayim, right where the temple will be built in the future. Moshe wants to see the land of Israel. He did his job. He took Bnei Israel out of Egypt, and he wants to complete the job. He wants to go into the land of Israel. But God was wrathful to me on your account and did not listen to my request. God said, enough, leave me alone. Al tosef daberi layod badavar hazeh. Don't speak to me more about this matter. And interestingly, there's a midrash, which Aviva Zorenberg writes about, I believe it's in her book, Moses, that talks about how Moshe here blames Bnei Israel, but we know there's the instance of Mei Meriva, that God says to Moshe, you're not going over because you rebelled against me. You did not make a Kiddush Hashem by hitting the rock or screaming at Bnei Israel. So why is Moshe blaming everybody else? And there's this midrash, and Aviva Zorenberg talks about that Moshe was terribly disappointed, because when God said to him, you can't go into the land of Israel, he expected Bnei Israel to say, we got your back, Moshe. You might not be able to say anything anymore, but we're going to plead with God. We're going to complain. We're going to intervene on your behalf in the same way that you intervened for us. But they don't. They don't intervene for Moshe. And Moshe feels a great sense of being let down, of being disappointed about the people whom he has protected, whom he has shielded, whom he has supported, that at a moment where he needs their support, they don't give it to him. And thus God says, after saying to Moshe, stop, leave me alone. Ale rosh hapiska, v'sayinecha yama, v'tzafona, v'teimanu, mizrachu, re'evenecha. Go up to the top of the Pisgah and look to the west, to the north, to the south, to the east. You will not go across the Jordan River. So is God helping Moshe here by saying to Moshe, look, and you'll see it, so you sort of see it, even if you won't go into it yourself, or does it make it more hurtful? I guess it depends upon the personality. I think it's a moment of comfort. Moshe, you see the land, you will not pass into it, but you can envision what Bnei Yisrael, how they will be successful, and you have brought them to this point. V'tzavet Yoshua v'chatzkeu v'amsehu. In verse 20, we continue. God says to Moshe that you have to strengthen Yoshua. Strengthen him. Give him strength and courage, because he's going to lead the land, in the people into Israel, to the land that you will see but will not enter. And these words, Chazkeu v'amseu, in regards to Yoshua, we'll see them again and again. Chazak v'yamatz. Yoshua doesn't seem to be the strongest of personalities, and thus he needs to have people strengthen him. He needs to have people behind him. He can't deal necessarily with the rebellions that Moshe had to deal with. And Moshe finishes, or we finish chapter 3, Vanesha Bagai Mul Beit Peor. Meanwhile, we stayed at the valley near Beit Peor, a chapter that describes, sadly for Moshe, that he will not be going into the land of Israel, a chapter that we could say shows maybe the disappointment that Moshe has that Bnei Yisrael do not support him. Moshe sees the land of Israel. Maybe he's able to envision the future for his people, and envision that he will not witness, but one that certainly he lays the groundwork and allows it to happen.